Okay, it is 4:40, so we are going to get started because I want to maximize our time. Good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. My name is Zainab Khalil. I want to welcome you to today's event titled Abolitionist Futures, A World Beyond Criminalization and Punishment. This event is hosted by the Muslim Law Students Association in partnership with a lot of student organizations and centers, including Columbia Law Women's Association, the Black Law Students Association, the Middle Eastern Law Students Association, First Generational Professionals Empowering Women of Color, Outlaws, the Student Public Interest Network, Queer and Trans People of Color, the National Lawyers Guilds, Columbia Muslim Student Association, the Columbia Center for Justice, and the Columbia Center for Contemporary Critical Thought. So it's a lot of people, and I just wanted to say those acronyms all out loud because we're really generous. We're really thankful for your generous partnership. So we're very excited for tonight's discussion, which is an event that was actually supposed to take place back in March, right before school shut down. It was supposed to be on March 10th, and when school shut down, you know the rest. But in any case, we're very blessed to be able to have with us today all of the original guest speakers that we had invited earlier. As you can imagine, it's not easy at all to find a similar time when all of these amazing people are free and available at once. So for that, we're very grateful. And I want to give a special shout out to the RAP campaign and Brother Jose and Laura for changing the time of the event that they had planned with RAP, so it didn't conflict with this one. And that's actually a really good event that's been postponed to next week. I'll throw it in the chat, but it's a really great event with Brother Jose and Eddie Conway about the Black Panthers and Young Lords mentoring behind bars. And so I'll throw that in the chat, but check it out. I just want to say we have so many people joining us. I want to note that we have over 200 people who registered for this event, and I think that's impressive on any day, but especially these days when to voluntarily log onto Zoom voluntarily, not for work or not for school, is says a lot because people are already spending so much time on the screen. So I think it just shows how much people are really taking this issue very seriously, want to talk about criminalization, mass criminalization, and are really curious and want to learn more about abolition. So I'm just going to share a few logistical points, and then I'll introduce you to our panelists. So first, we have live closed captioning today. And so that will be available in the chat. It should be embedded there as soon as we get started. It's available to us through Columbia Disability Services and the National Captioning Institute, specifically Josh and Taylor, thank you. And then for number two, this event is going to be recorded. You can only see the panelists and hosts, so hopefully that's okay. We're going to be recording it for people who wanted to make it but couldn't join us today. And then finally, as far as any questions or comments that you want to share, because this is webinar style, you won't have a chance to unmute yourself or anything like that, but please just send me a text or a chat message to me specifically, and I will be sure to relay that to our facilitator. So without further ado, I will quickly introduce to you our panelists. Tonight's event is facilitated by Fatima Ashraf. Fatima has worked in government, nonprofit, and academia for nearly 20 years with a focus on dismantling the harmful impact of the criminal legal system. She is a professor of public policy at the City College of New York, where she invites her MPA students to think critically about the intersection of US domestic policy with capitalism, colonialism, and racism. Fatima runs a consulting firm known as Green Squash, which specializes in communications, stakeholder engagement, and project management and campaign strategy for individuals and organizations who are committed to racial, gender, environmental, economic, and social justice. I should also mention that Fatima is a very dear sister to me and a personal mentor and friend of mine, who I've learned a lot about from this, about this work. And so I'm really happy she's going to be facilitating this discussion today. Next, we have Brother Jose Hamza Saldana, who is the director of Release Aging People in Prison, a grassroots advocacy campaign working to end mass incarceration and promote racial justice through the release of older people in prison and those serving long-term prison sentences. As a person who was formerly incarcerated for 38 years, Mr. Saldana is a leading community organizer who works to reform parole, clemency, and compassionate release policies. While in prison, he earned an associate degree and founded several important rehabilitation, restorative justice, and victim awareness programs. Jose has mentored hundreds of people during his years inside and continues to inspire communities to think beyond a system of permanent punishments. You can follow RAP on social media or learn more about their campaign at rapcampaign.com. Camilla Pickett is a writer, racial equity trainer, and a public health advocate who specializes in nonprofit organizational development and giving advice that makes her mother proud. She is part of the national organizing team for Believers Bailout and has been advocating at the intersections of race, health, and justice for more than a decade. She is also a co-curator of Flowers, a digital space that celebrates Black brilliance, culture, and love from the perspective of Black Muslim women. Camilla holds a JD from Georgetown University Law Center and an MPH from the Morehouse School of Medicine. Next, we have Zainab Shahar. Zainab here? Yes, you're here. Zainab is a writer based in Chicago. Currently, Zainab is pursuing a doctorate in comparative religion at the Chicago Theological Seminary. Their research focuses on the relationship between gender, ritual obligation, and public religious space within Jewish and Islamic legal traditions. Zainab also researches and writes about spiritual abolition and the theological imagination, as well as abolition and disability. And finally, but definitely not least in any way, we have Key Williams, who is the national organizer of the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. As a queer, trans-masculine, identified organizer, artist, and public speaker, Key's work uses a structural oppression analysis to create radical change. And Key uses their platform to bring in the lived experiences of those who are Black, queer, gender nonconforming, and transgender. He was a founding member and former organizer with Black Lives Matter Global Network and was lead organizer on campaigns such as Safety Beyond Policing, Swipe It Forward, Trans Liberation Tuesday, and No New Jails NYC. And without further ado, I will pass it on to Fatima.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you for bringing these amazing panelists together tonight. Thank you to all the participants who are here. We're so happy to have you for this discussion. My name is Fatima Ashraf. I am going to be facilitating tonight's discussion. As Zainab mentioned, to the participants, please send your questions via the chat and we will try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. My introduction into this work around the criminal legal system and the prison industrial complex really comes as somebody that was trained in graduate programs to think that working inside of the system and making reforms inside of the system was the solution to all of the problems. After graduate school, I did a stint in city government as a policy advisor to a dictator mayor, who I'll let you all guess who that was. Any one of them, it could be, I suppose, and learned very, very quickly that working inside of the system holds huge, huge limitations. I'll tell you one very quick story to demonstrate what I mean, and then we'll get into the questions to our panelists. So I was working for the city of New York in the mayor's office for Mike Bloomberg as a policy advisor, and it was the year 2009 when he decided to cut $50 million from the after-school programs budget. And I said, you know, you can't do that. Like, these programs need this money. It doesn't need to go anywhere else. You can guess where it was going at the height of stop and frisk, to the NYPD. And, you know, very few people inside were politically aligned with somebody like me, but I did manage to find a couple of like-minded people, and we spent 6 months developing a plan, showing the mayor and the deputy mayors and the budget office that this cut was not necessary, that we could pull from a variety of different line items in the city budget to make up for any gap that existed in order to not cut after-school programs. Every other agency was willing and ready to cut a couple million here and there in order to make this happen. The day came for us to make this presentation to the mayor and the execs. And after the presentation, the mayor just deadpan looked at all of us and said, "This is ridiculous. Of course, we're going to make this cut." So all of that work was for naught. And as we were leaving, one of the very senior officials pulled me aside and looked me in the eye and said, "Listen, sweetie, it's not about the money. This is New York. This is America. Of course we have the money. It's that we don't care." And that was my very, not first, but very visceral understanding of what it means to work inside of the system. The reality is that these systems in the United States of America do not care about our liberation. In fact, it is the opposite. The course that I teach at City College is an introduction to public policy. It's an introduction to how and why policy exists in the United States. Public policy exists in the United States through its founding: genocide, slavery, colonialism, and capitalism. All policies that have been created in this country have been vestiges of those four founding actions. The prison industrial complex, the criminal legal system are the epitome of that fact. So today we are going to hear from our panelists, our experts, about their experience with the carceral state, the prison industrial complex, the criminal legal system, however they choose to talk about the system, their interactions with it, their thoughts about dismantling it, the need for all of us to be involved in this work in order to facilitate everybody's collective liberation. So our first question tonight for our panelists is, tell us about your first exposure to the carceral system. What got you involved or interested in the work that you do? And I'm going to ask Zainab Sahar to start.
Okay. I think my first exposure to the criminal justice system was in high school, actually. I was a part of different groups like Youth for a Democratic Society. I would work with students to we were kind of the informal May Day marchers. We didn't ask for our school's permission, but we would go to the annual May Day protest in Chicago, which used to be epic. But every time I went, we were always squaring off with militarized police. And as a teenager, that kind of blew my mind, especially because if you know anything about the anti-war left at the time, is they're white people who are really interested in emphasizing the fact that they protest peacefully, right? Like that's kind of their tagline. That's the hill that they want to die on forever, and make a very unfortunate distinction between peaceful protests and everything else. And those experiences, like just marching with other people downtown, I think really broke me as a teenager, because it's like, if you can't do this, then like, what exactly can you do? And it really pushed me to think and connect with other people through the internet or through like local groups in Chicago who were trying to think about alternatives to the world that we live in.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry you had that experience as a teenager. At the same time, I'm happy you had it earlier on in your life so that it informs where you are today, and we'll hear more about that shortly. I'd like to ask Jose the same question. Tell us about your first interactions, exposures to the carceral state, and what got you involved and interested in the work that you do.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank everyone who's listening to this very important discussion that we're having here. I grew up in Spanish Harlem, or what we would call El Barrio. And later on, we would clarify that to call it the People's Republic of El Barrio. When I was 9 years old, I used to hang around this building where street sex workers were at. And I got real cool with a few of them. One in particular, I used to run errands. I used to run errands for most of them, but one I used to run errands for, and I would never accept any payment for running the errands, going to the grocery stores, buying stuff for them. And one day she sent some money in a list of things to pick up. And when I came back, there was a raid. And as I tried to kind of tiptoe my way into the building, I'm seeing a bunch of cops just grab her by the hair and just rise her down the stairs, her head bumping at every stair, just bumping, blood everywhere. And I was horrified. I looked at that, and I had the groceries in my hand. I didn't know what to do, but I know that this was terribly wrong, that this person did not deserve this. And a few things happened between 9 years old and when I was 27, 28 years old. But fast forward 20 years later, I'll be charged for attempted murder of a New York City police sergeant. I carry that memory with me my entire life after that. That moment there defined who policing was in our community. And I was charged with that crime. I was convicted, received a sentence of 25 years to life. I served 38 years of that sentence. And during my incarceration, I seen even greater horrors of how people were mistreated. And I've seen how the elder were treated. And I've seen at that point, the last 10 years of my incarceration, I've seen that men were dying at a relatively young age from medical neglect or being brutally beaten to death. And these are the things, man, that years of witnessing these things, of being gassed myself, this is what inspired me to commit myself to dismantling this entire system, because it is the remnants of slavery.
Thank you so much, Jose, for sharing that story. And for those of you listening, you can hear in our dear brother's voice here the commitment he brings as somebody who experienced firsthand throughout his life the experience, the tragic, torturous nature of policing and prisons. And so we thank you for being one of our freedom fighters in this struggle. So I'd like to pose a question to Sister Camila Pickett. If you don't mind, Sister, if you would answer this question with your lawyer hat on, because I understand we have a lot of lawyers in the house tonight. What does abolition mean to you? What experiences have you had in your life that shape your understanding of abolition?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Brother Jose, for sharing that with us and for continuing to bring to light the voice of what happens on the inside, right? I think a lot of us who do this work, we have to be intentionally focused on why we're doing it, that it's not an abstract concept that we're fighting against or an abstract thing that we're fighting for, that there are actual real people. So thank you for that. So the definition that I use when I talk about abolition is a common one. It's basically a political vision with the goal of eliminating imprisonment and policing and surveillance and creating alternatives to punishment and imprisonment, which is basically the goal of our justice system, right? And so it means to me, building models that represent how we want to live in the future and developing practical strategies for taking the steps to ensure that we are living in a world that doesn't prioritize putting folks in cages. So it's a practical organizing tool, but it's also a long-term goal. And, you know, for me, my Islam, my practice of Islam is the liberation theology. It's not religious practices that I can separate from my everyday life. It is a way of life. And being Muslim for me means that I have obligations to people I'm in community with, right? And a lot of times when folks talk about rights, they talk about things that they are owed, but not necessarily what they owe others. And I think in learning about abolition and striving to be an abolitionist, right? Because BBO is an abolitionist organization, but we're learning. There is no perfect definition of it. It is something that you constantly struggle against because we've been indoctrinated into the system as it exists today, right? So you're always in the process of unlearning. But for me, it's not just about rights that folks are owed. It's about your obligations to your community. And those things go hand in hand. And so what Believers Bailout does is ask Muslims to entrust their zakat funds. Zakat is a pillar of Islam. It is a tax on wealth for those who can afford it, to give it once a year during Ramadan. And we ask folks to use their Zakat funds to bail out folks that are incarcerated. And for us, it does two things. It does a very practical thing of providing bail relief for folks who need it, but it also reminds people that our community is vast, it is varied, that we have obligations not just to those we see in front of us, right? But to all people who are struggling under systems of oppression. And it is a practical thing that we can do. It's a tangible thing we can do to have people immediately see the benefits of it, right? When I was younger, the idea of giving zakat seemed like this kind of fuzzy idea, like you give the money to the masjid and you don't know exactly where it goes unless you're on the receiving end of it, maybe, right? You know that it probably goes all these different places. And we have this idea that it's for people who need help or resources, but there are many categories of folks who qualify for zakat. And so we wanted to put the focus on folks who were being oppressed and being held captive. And that's what bail is. People are there because they can't afford not to be. So that is the focus that we use. And so those principles of the rights that I owe my community as a Muslim guide me in the work that I do. It guides my understanding of how I think about things, right? Being in community is messy and it's hard and it's difficult. But doing the work of being in community with people and looking at it through an abolitionist lens means that everybody got to be free, right? Everybody has to be healthy. Everybody has to be well. And so that's what abolition means to me. And that's the lens that I look at.
Thank you so much for that. And Zainab Khalil, if you could drop the link for Believers Bailout into the chat, that'd be great too. To everybody on the line who is Muslim and obligated to give zakat, I totally encourage supporting BBO. Kia, I'm going to come over to you now with that same question. What does abolition mean to you, and what experiences and maybe dabble into some of your principles shape your understanding of abolition?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try to keep it really brief so we can dive into some of the juicier questions. I think when I think about abolition in this particular context, right, of like criminalization and punishment, it is the exact point of what we're talking about today, which is like a world beyond that, a world beyond criminalization and punishment. So I actually very much like simply put, like, yes, this longer, more like this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like, this is the world that we're envisioning, is all parts of the components of abolition. And it just it's for me, I think about abolition as like the harm reduction, just like perfect harm reduction. It's like perfect harm reduction, right? Like if we could just reach there and be able to have a world that people can live and thrive and have communities that are resource. And I really appreciate you telling your story earlier about working inside, because I think that was very much my experience with the No New Jails campaign, right? We were very much met by the city council members of, we don't understand this, is very like clueless, I just can't imagine, kind of presentation, which led to, yes, this creation of the, Close Rikers with No New Jails abolition plan that we created with No New Jails. And it was a great document. It's a great resource for community, which is great and brilliant. But we wasted so much time having to build that up because we thought that maybe this tool set will be the thing that allows them to defund from this $10 billion program, which calls for building 4 new jails without the guaranteeing of closing Rikers Island. And Brother Jose and I also worked on that together. And it was very beautiful to work with RAP on that campaign and be able to kind of merge together the reality of talking about abolition, defunding the police, and all these things that are charged items. But the reality is like, these are the things that we need to do in order to survive, in order to live, in order to thrive, right? And so in regards to my experience with abolition, I think many experiences that I had in my life led me to this point. that I didn't realize or think about. Stories of, like my mom's house being raided and what a raid actually looked like. So it's not uncommon for police to literally come into your house and destroy it. That is their intention when they actually execute a raid, right? Pour sugar on the floor, empty all the cereal, break your dressers, like literally actually destroy people's property as part of the raid, right? Hearing about that growing up, hearing about my father having some type of mental health illness because he got beat on by the police as a teenager, and our family never quite talking about that, but me seeing that play out in older life. And then I think Black Lives Matter. I mean, I think Trayvon Martin, I think Ferguson, I think Eric Garner. For me, I think Sandra Bland, but I think today I was looking at, as a trans activist and activist of faith, I was looking at some past pictures of when folks were in Ferguson, and there was this Black trans woman who said, like, we're all here because a Black cis man died, but 5 Black trans women have been murdered in the past month, even in 2014. So these nuances that we're expressing, like, and experiencing right now isn't new, but I'm thankful for any time that we get to envision and think about a world beyond criminalization and punishment, because that's the only thing that's going to get us there. That's going to get us free. So I'll step back, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Key. That's really wonderful to hear your perspective. And I also want to call our listeners' attention to the No New Jails report. It is a fantastic piece of work, research, writing, literature, the abolitionist future. I mean, incredible. Zainab, if you get a chance, Zainab K, if you get a chance to find that link, already did it in the chat. I really encourage everybody to read that, download it, read it, and send it to everybody. I know it's very important for all of us who work inside of oppressive systems, and who are studying inside of academia that also has a very specific role to play in oppressive systems, to build up, legitimize, and uplift the work that comes from coalitions like No New Jails and the type of truths that this report was able to put out there for people to grapple with. So let's dig in, as Key said, to a juicy question. And this question is about the notion of criminalization. So Key was talking about, all of our panelists so far have talked about the importance of an alternative way, because currently we live in a society that criminalizes so many things that have no place being criminalized, right? And criminalization comes from laws and legality, right? What is criminal? Who decides what is criminal? Who decides what is legal? Who decides what is illegal? And again, because we have a lot of future lawyers, maybe current lawyers in the audience tonight, the question that I'd like to pose to the panel is, do you think there is a place for the legal community in abolitionist work? What advice do you have for students who are thinking about how to connect their education and work to the radical vision of an abolitionist future, knowing that the law is one of the main reasons why the carceral state exists? So who wants to tackle that? Take a minute. All right, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I'm swaying, but go ahead, sis.
No, I mean, if you want to jump in, you got it.
Camila, go ahead. Then we'll go to Key, and then we'll actually. This is a good question, so maybe Zainab S and Jose will want to chime in too. But Camila, let's start with you.
So I will start by saying this. I was reading something recently, and I wish I could remember the author, but it was a Black woman, and she was talking about how going to law school for her meant subjecting herself to like daily oppression, right? Like the act of being in law school. And when she said it, it just triggered these memories, right? Because every day you are debating with your classmates the very idea that you could or should be free, right? And it starts immediately, class 1, con law, first day, right? And so 3 years of that, and figuring out how to navigate that and what you want to come out on the other end is hard, right? And step one, I think, is finding your people. People who will keep you grounded, people who will keep you focused, and who will remind you of who you are and what it is that you bring of value to the table. Dismantling these systems is a huge job, and it's not a singular one, right? There is a part for every person in this big like mess, right? It took a long time to create. It takes like effort to maintain. So it's going to take that same dedication to dismantle. So everybody has a part, right? So I don't think there's any one way to come out of law school and be an abolitionist, right? I think that what you have to do is find the piece that you're passionate about and then tackle that. And do it in a way that puts you in community with other people who are focusing on other parts, right? Because I think we tend to find ourselves in silos and like dig in and put our heads down. And the downside to that is you could be unintentionally recreating systems of harm, right? If I get so focused on my liberation that all I think about is me and people who look like me and think like me, then I am excluding other folks from theirs potentially, right? And so it requires community. It requires constantly re-examining what you think you know, and being willing to continually learn. So what I love about being part of Believers Bailout is that we have decided first and foremost that we are a community, right? And we are a community of, there are students, there are longtime activists, there are people who don't consider themselves to be either one, right? We are a community that includes everybody who has given us their Zakat funds and entrusted that to us, right? Who may not even call themselves abolitionists, but just know they want to right a wrong. We are a community that includes our incarcerated kin, right? And so for us, intentionally building community means that our first act of abolition starts with how we treat each other. And I think for lawyers, that is like a crucial step, right? Because you can advocate on behalf of people and still not really rock with them. And feel like you're doing them good, and feel yourself in some sort of way like superior to the issue that you're supposed to be tackling. So you have to be in community with people, and you have to be advocating with people. And I think that if more law students went through law school with that lens, right, just that very basic lens, that would help a lot. And I think when you come out on the other side and you start doing whatever work you're doing, you can apply that lens to absolutely anything, right?
Thank you so much for that. Key, you want to take a stab at that also, building off of what Camila just said?
Yeah, I mean, I keep it really, really short, as much as I can, but I think that what I've been reflecting on, especially, I was actually looking at the law today because I'm rolling out some electoral campaigns, right? Of course, we all are looking at the elections. And so I was like nerding out on like this one part of the Constitution. I was like, well, if this happens in the 15th Amendment, doesn't this become invalidated by the 13th Amendment, right? Like on this really small clause thing, right? That's how I look at the law. I look at the law in this way of like, how do we tinker with it to cut out everything else? Because that's exactly what the Republicans are doing right now, tweaking and tinkering in things that lead to the gut, like to the gutting of these things, Voting Rights Act, et cetera. Another thing is that we know that Black people and Indigenous people are the reason why the law has been used as a political tool to shift power, right? That is something historically that Black organizers, Fannie Lou Hamer, right? came to this political ideal of using the legal system as a tool and really created that platform, that infrastructure that was then turned on its head by reformists, et cetera, utilizing criminalization and punishment to bring us here. But it was Black and brown people who created this way of looking at the law to say, this is how things can shift and must be changed. And that is what RBG does, right? And so me as a gender justice activist or did, was looking at this one little point of saying like, wait, we're not trying to disrupt anything for y'all. It's just at this, as you said, Sister Camilla, at this very basic level, how can we all be included in this thing together, right? So, and then like lastly, I shout out most frequently one of my dearest comrades who really ran the Free Osmar Darboe campaign, who's a Black immigrant who actually is from the Bronx. And despite him being pardoned by Cuomo, he had been detained in the Bronx for like 3 years. Right, and so and Sophia just really worked really hard on fighting his case and advocating and building through an abolitionist lens, freeing this brother. And so in terms of what it means to be a lawyer and participate, et cetera, if you're going in, as you said, sis, with that basic lens, but also growing and studying and continue to grow and build, you need every tool that you could possibly get. And I want to just credit that, like, you know, without Thurgood Marshall, there would be no RBG. Like, just like really on a real sense, if you think historically about it. And that's part of the way that I look at things.
Thank you. So I'm going to slightly change the question for Zainab S. and for Jose to think about the same issue of legality, right? And how legality defines both criminalization and innocence. So when thinking about the law and how the law chooses to define innocence, what does it miss? How does the framework of innocence through the law cause an inherent instability in the criminal legal system? Zainab S. or Jose, who would like to try to continue to tackle this issue around legality? Jose, go ahead. I see you're unmuted.
Very quickly, yes. Well, first, the law fails to really acknowledge the culprit in this whole situation. It's the socioeconomic conditions that we all inherited at birth. This is totally excluded from the legality of the issues. And I think this is the first fallacy of this legal system, that they create the problem and then try to redefine the problem as if we were the ones who created this problem. And it's the same thing for guilt or innocence. They entirely exclude that they're all guilty. They're all guilty and complicit in this whole system, from whether you see it from a capitalist lens or from a racial lens, but it's still comes down to the same thing. They are all complicit in sustaining this criminal legal system that marginalizes communities, neutralizes resistance to social and racial injustice, and then charge us with a crime. And I want to also touch on that, you know, I think it's, to me, I find it very difficult for a prosecutor to seriously and honestly have abolitionist visions. I just don't see it. They're too sold into the system. They are part of the machinery that makes this system work the way it does. And defense attorney, I see it because the defense attorney defends those who are going to be criminalized by this system. So I tip my hat off, tip my kufi off to those defense attorneys who take their vow along those terms, that they will defend those who are being criminalized and victimized by a racist, evil system that is designed to actually marginalize entire communities of people and keep them powerless. And then not only that, he acknowledges that, but he takes every opportunity in a courtroom or outside a courtroom to expose that, at the risk of being held in contempt.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Jose. That's that's the answer to the question, at least in my perspective, right? Zainab S., what do you think?
So in response to the idea of what does innocence miss, I think, like, I'm not a constitutional legal scholar. Like, I deal with a whole different branch of dead people. But what I will say is that I think people, by and large, tend to forget that notions of innocence and guilt are constructs. They're not flat constructs that have precise definitions that are applied each and every single time, regardless of the situation. You are literally relying on whatever judge or even whatever prosecutor to apply whatever notion of innocence is operative for them, no matter how screwed up, prejudiced, out of this world it might be, and apply it to a particular situation. And I think if we're thinking about those frameworks from an abolitionist perspective, innocence and guilt are really terrible metrics for actually determining like how harm happens and how harm reverberates within communities. Like an innocent or guilty verdict doesn't really tell you how a particular situation or scenario impacts people on both micro and macro levels, right? Nor does it give you any real indication of what kind of resources are necessary to implement harm reduction, right? The only thing that innocence and guilt tell you is that someone either broke the law or someone was found for whatever reason to have not broken the law. But those designations don't actually tell you anything significant from a sociological standpoint about how you could actually prevent that kind of harm or scenario in the future. And it's unfortunate the way that we socialize people in the United States to think about law, because we socialize them to think about it as a fairly neutral thing, when it is the farthest thing from it. And it's a conversation I'm currently having with my undergraduate students in ritual studies in response to something that happened on campus. And I was like, breaking school policy, punishing someone according to school policy doesn't necessarily provide that person with the education they need to like not be anti-Semitic, right? Like the only thing that tells you is that they broke a rule and this is the punishment that follows after that. So trying to get my fresh out of high school, had really terrible government and social studies classes students to understand that like laws are not neutral and laws are constructed is a horrific hurdle to try and climb. And when I think about that, those conversations I'm having with them, I think about full-blown adults who truly believe that law is somehow neutral.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So let's establish that right now, everybody who's listening, laws are not neutral. And let's also establish what Brother Jose said, that the notions of legality miss who the actual culprits are in doing things that are destructive to our society, right? It is the people that set those legalities that are the culprits, which is also why the law is not neutral, right? And then what Camila and Key were saying around lawyers really coming into this with their eyes wide open about how they can use the law or not use the law in order to advocate for their community and to have, to give the rights to their community members, the rights that all of them and all of us deserve. So we're getting some questions from the lawyers about this issue of operating inside of the legal system and the legal frameworks. So there's two questions here. I'm going to combine them together. So one question is about how to be a lawyer, how to be an abolitionist lawyer if you're actively part of a system of oppression. Even if you are a public defender who advocates for people, to be a defense attorney is to be an advocate for someone, you are still doing so through the system of oppression. How can you do this and be an abolitionist? And then simultaneously, another one of our law students has a question around the 4 justifications of punishment that underlie common law? And should there be a fifth tenet that abolition brings to the conversation? What might that look like? And how can we dismantle the theoretical foundations of deciding if and when society needs to punish? So these questions really are about the system, and how do we work inside the system, and what needs to happen to have a conversation about dismantling it. Who shall we start with? Maybe Brother Jose, you want to start with this one?
I gotta tip my kufi off to these lawyers who envision a world without prisons, and yet are actually working within a system that they know send people to prisons. I think it's a tightrope to work. You got to live with yourself. You got to look at yourself every day in the mirror and be convinced that you did the right thing according to the principles that you uphold. And I think that to do that, you can't encourage. These are the simple things that you can or cannot do. You cannot encourage people to plead guilty. You just can't, because it's not even a question. You can't ask people, are you guilty? It's not a question. You know that it's not a question of guilt or innocence. You have to always try to develop a strategy to expose the system. Working with your client, letting your client know what you believe in and how you want to handle this, to expose this system to the point where it becomes a personal matter between your client and the system. And do it in a way that, you probably risk a lot of, legal sanctions, but this is what you bought into. You claim to be an abolitionist attorney, then you have to take these type of risks to not the entire system. Jurors, call it for what it is. They're putting jurors on that panel for one purpose, to convict. And the ones that they favor, you have to expose them also. You just have to work on exposing this system at every opportunity that you can, with your client's permission, of course. You don't want them to feel that, you're doing something that's gonna kind of worsen his predicament. But this is who you are. This is why it's going to be difficult for you to represent a lot of people, because a lot of people may not want this type of defense, may not want you to expose the legacy of racism that dominates this system at every turn, from policing what they did, expose the police, the actions of the police in arresting the person, the actions of the prosecutor in prosecuting the person, and then the role of the judge. And all this takes, it takes a lot. But if a person has that belief in this is his or her way of being a part of the abolitionist movement that is really designed to dismantle this system, and this is his or her role in it.
Thank you so much. That was so clear, the importance. So basically, if you want to be an abolitionist lawyer, you need to expose what you learned for what it is to everybody who does not have the access to the information that you do. Sister Camilla, can I ask you, as somebody who went to law school, to answer this question for our law students?
Yeah, so I would say this: don't take out $150,000 in loans to be a cop. Like, don't do that. So, there is working in the system, and there is being a chimp. So don't do that, right? Step one. But I think, you have to look at abolition holistically, which is what Brother Jose is talking about, right? So yes, this is a system that we absolutely want to dismantle. And yes, absolutely, we know that it is rotten to its core. And it may feel like not the most revolutionary thing to operate inside of it, but people got to get out of jail, right? there needs to be people who are doing the very practical work, right? And then there needs to be dreamers. We can't all be dreamers and philosophizing about how we would like things to look. Meanwhile, people are still being, arrested and still being sent to jail, right? Somebody has to intercede at that point. That's not the thing that feels, all the time like you are out on the front lines doing the work that makes you feel the most revolutionary, but it's needed, right? Like you need people who can intercede at every level. And so, yeah, if, being a public defender is what it is you want to do, you can absolutely bring your values to that work. It's going to be hard, right? Because public defense pays crap. You don't get great training. They literally throw you out the window with a bunch of clients who are depending on you fresh off a bar exam to be the intercessor between them and jail. That's some scary stuff, right? Like first client I had in clinic that got sent to jail, I lost it. Like I literally sat outside and just wept. Because the weight of it felt like, why are they letting me do this? Right? Like I should not be the person in between somebody in jail. But if that's the charge that you take, then you have to actually feel the weight of it. At no time can it just be your daily job, right? At no time can it just be, you just go through the motions. Every time you have to intercede between somebody in prison, you need to act like it's you, right? Like that's your life, every single time. And so I think if folks thought about that while they were advocating, then that keeps you focused on what the goal is, right? At the same time, though, you need people who are going to always be pointing out that this system is corrupt, that it is not designed to work for you, that it is rotten to its core, that it is racist, right? That is not, your oppression is never going to come through these means. I mean, your liberation is never going to come through these means. But you do what you got to do while you're here. And always have an eye on better and bigger things. And so to try to frame abolition discussions within the framework of like these 4 tenets, it's like, no, it's something different, right? Don't try to mold it into part of the system because it's not. It's a completely different way of thinking. The system that we have now, like Zainab was saying, like it is about punishment. It is about it's allegedly about addressing harm, but at no point do we actually think about the people who have been harmed, right? There's nothing transformative about the way we do stuff. There's nothing restorative about the way the system works, right? And you can't add those things on as like tags to the system, because all you do then is just make it something else to be corrupted by it. It's like the difference between defunding the police and reform. Those are not the same thing. Those are very different conversations. But if you try hard enough, you can try to make them look alike, right? And I think that's what happens when people look at the way the system works now as the only option. Where it sounds scary, like, what do we do if we don't have the system? We think of something else. This didn't always exist, right? You think of something else. You put in place something else that works better for how people want to live their lives, right? So it requires practical work, it requires imagination, and it requires us all to be really honest about what we can bring to the table and why we're there.
Thank you so much, Camila, for that. I'm gonna take what you said and formulate it into the next series of questions that I'd like to ask Zainab S. and Key to start off answering. but it is around the what is next, that this wasn't always the way that things were done. How could it look? How could it be different? I always think whenever I see homeless folks being criminalized for sleeping in a park, I always think, how come the rich people who've left behind vacant apartments aren't criminalized for leaving behind a vacant apartment while people are sleeping in the street? Like, what about that? Maybe it could be different that way. I mean, not to say that I want to continue to criminalize stuff, but just to say, what else? What is a different way of thinking? What would another option look like? So we're getting some questions about what exactly abolition would look like. And then I also want to draw into this Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who talks about how abolition actually exists for some people today, right? There are places where cities, neighborhoods, populations for whom abolition is actually a daily practice. So maybe Zainab S., if you could start off by talking about what that looks like and how it could be managed for all of us.
So one of the ways that I started thinking about abolition as a daily practice, particularly when I moved back to Chicago, is I spend a lot of time like biking and walking around my neighborhood, kind of getting into what Walter Rodney talks about is like your groundings, like the people who you interact with on a day in, day out basis. And in the process of doing that, I started to pay attention to everything that my neighborhood does not and did not have. Like, I've lived here for 6 years. I only recently had a grocery store that was 3 blocks away from my house for the past 6 months or so, right? Similarly, UIC tried to open a public health clinic in that same plaza and jumped ship probably 3 weeks later. Like, now it's a Army recruiting office of all things. It's kind of sad, like the Army recruiting office next to the Chase Bank. It's like, all that's missing is Bank of America or something like that, right? But doing that helped me realize like what all the money that Chicago, especially because I'm the sole Midwesterner here, like for how much money Chicago perpetually spends on policing, which from my recollection was like 40% of our city's budget, how much of that could actually go to outbuilding my neighborhood, and not in this way that's like, oh, the Obama Center is coming nearby, or the golf course by my house might go PGA. So that means all the old Black people who golf over there are going to get kicked out for like the next Tiger Woods or something like that. But actually thinking about how my neighborhood effectively doesn't have public health clinics, doesn't have domestic violence shelters. I think there are 3 within the city of Chicago, and none of them exist in my part of town. So that means, and I've actually been a part of de-escalating a situation and unfortunately having to send somebody like far and away from their own neighborhood to seek shelter. And it's a heinously crappy feeling to know that like, even as you're trying to practice abolition in these small ways, the only way that people see resources coming to depressed neighborhoods is through gentrification and development, right? And so when I think about what it means to practice abolition daily, I think about, well, what if you didn't have the big bad savior of gentrification or development to make a neighborhood better? What might actually make your neighborhood more functional than it actually is? And I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me, it's having resources so that everyday people can thrive regardless of their socioeconomic income. Because from where I sit, my neighborhood is a perfect example of what criminalization looks like in terms of urban geography. You have a bank that charges people highway robbery to bank with them, a rent-a-center. I didn't know that those still existed, to be perfectly honest, but like the idea that you rent used furniture is just heinous to me. And the police camp out and keep their horses at the South Shore Cultural Center So on the one hand, you have them camped out at the South Shore Cultural Center, and then you actually have the police station in our neighborhood. And it's like, we have an absence of resources, but we're not short on policing whatsoever. So I think about what would happen if those things got flipped and we actually had more resources, and those horses that stink up the lakefront now actually went to go live at some vegan animal sanctuary somewhere in Maine. I don't know. We don't really do animal sanctuaries like that in the Midwest. So that's what I think about.
Thank you. Thank you. So Keys, same question. So how does abolition show up in some communities, and how can it show up in all communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think of like building on top of a bunch of other things that you already shared, sis. And I think when we think about the access to the criminal, the access to what criminal justice looks like within the system, right? Like, you know, Weinstein gets to go home and get to the hospital, while like people who are incarcerated for, you know, jumping the turnstile for $2.75 are on Rikers Island for sometimes months, sometimes years. Someone like Khalif, right, who doesn't even steal a backpack, but ends up on Rikers Island for years, making that commitment that Brother Jose talked about, right? Of like, no, I'm actually going to test the system and challenge the system, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice to push back, right? And so we know that we have like two different systems. We know that we have two different societies and two different realities. I think about New York City, and I'm always like frustrated by de Blasio, who came in with like the tale of two cities. And it's like, we've just had sequels upon sequels upon sequels. Like he has a whole volume of like tales of two cities onward, because it's so expanded by this point in time. And, you know, you spoke about the indifference, and how do we push up against indifference towards criminalization of people, right? So I think about Safety Beyond Policing, you know, a campaign that we led in 2015, when the mayor wanted to add new police officers to the force. And we said, take $94 million and invest it into schools and invest it into youth jobs, and the same exact approach. And the same thing that we did with the No New Jails platform, right? Of like taking $10 billion and, you know, you can end homelessness, right? Like right now, the city intentionally underfunds and like underfunds the homeless shelters, while like while also like funding, I guess is the word, an unsafe shelter system. And there's like this weird imbalance where like we're continuing to pour money into an unsafe shelter system that doesn't work, while not having adequate housing to begin with. You know, like the mayor, you know, used repairs as an excuse to sell off NYCHA housing. 62,000 NYCHA houses he sold off to corporate management. You know, the money to expand Rikers could have been used to repair NYCHA and create high quality public housing for our communities, right? You know, and I think about one of the things is like, what is the concept of crime? And the crime in America, and the crime in New York City, and the crime globally has always been to be poor. If you are poor, then that is the ultimate crime. The ultimate crime is to be poor. And poverty is really a huge source of criminalization. You know, in jails punish and warehouse poor people with mental health needs. And so all these different ways in which we can guarantee a better future is like what abolition looks like, right? So it's like New York City using these funds to create thousands of jobs for youth, you know, for making more diverse and equitable classrooms right now. Like there's a shortage of teachers during a pandemic because of such like, you know, underfunding. You know, Bill de Blasio choosing to add a new class of police officers that's going to cost $22 million, when he's like, oh, we got to cut the school budget by 12 million. What do you mean? Right? Like, and so seeing the numbers and pushing back up against that is one of the things. But my struggle is, I think at some point my struggle is like, how much can abolition solve, and when do we have to move to revolution? How much is abolition going to actually be able to push us where we need to go? And so we say, actually, abolition is this kind of point. Like my starting point right now is abolition. I'm not talking about reform anymore. My starting point is abolition. And like, if you're not working with me on abolition, then now we're going to revolution. Like I've started to just like escalate at this point in time. Because my experience as an organizer has been these consistent cycles of trying to achieve things. And so I think about kind of one of our strategic plans that we created, was the goal to abolish the institution of policing by establishing a completely autonomous community control of our public safety, right? And so that looks like we have kind of 5 components that we've been playing around with, which is defunding the police, divesting from the police, disbanding the police, decentralizing our public safety. So breaking away, like today I found out that the US Postal Service has police officers. When did that, like what? Like, so, okay, decentralize our public safety. And then lastly, establish community control of public safety. And these tactics work in order and bring us together and bring us closer to our goal. So as an activist, I'm thinking a little bit more tactically about how do we take these escalation steps, for a larger strategy in the framework of abolition, and how do we apply it rapidly.
I appreciate that, Key. Thank you. And I appreciate, Zainab, your points about also what resources do you not see in your community? And Key, you uplifting the similar idea of the fact that resources are so inadequately, ridiculously, woefully inadequate. The fact that the mayor of any city will cut education funding at any point in time, much less during a pandemic, but still have money to increase budgets of police officers, like that should not make any sense to any of us, right? And again, as somebody who's worked inside of government systems for many years, I can tell you, it is not about the money. There is plenty of money. The scarcity model is something that is forced upon us. We're forced to believe that there's no money when, y'all, this is our money. These are our tax dollars that we are putting into these pots that are being used to criminalize and to incarcerate our people. There's plenty of money to take away from carceral institutions and to put into making sure everybody has housing. One of the key parts of No New Jails was free transit. Okay, you guys want to arrest people for jumping the turnstile for $2.75? How about you just make transit free? Now you don't have to arrest people for jumping the turnstile for $2.75. The reality is that is not what they want to do, right? So I want to shift gears a little bit because this event tonight is being hosted by the Muslim Law Students Association. We are getting some questions from the audience about how Islam and how your understanding of Islamic traditions informs your practice and commitment to abolition. And also, how can we bring this conversation of abolition into faith-based spaces? So let me ask Sister Camila to start off, and then I'll go to Brother Jose.
Sure. So I will explore the intent of the question a little bit, right? Because I feel like people ask these questions like there is anything else I can do, right? Like when people ask, like, how do you exist in this space as a Black woman? Or how do you exist in this space as a Muslim woman? And it's like, because that's what I am. Like, I don't know any other way to be in a space than exactly as I am. And so for me, like I said earlier, my practice is my way of life. So that lens is applied to everything I do, right? And in having conversations with other Muslims about abolition, I think the starting point is what drives your faith, right? If your intent is to exist here as a healthy, functioning person who is part of healthy, functioning, whole communities, right? Who exists to nurture and support each other under this idea that the work that we do here and this life, right, is the groundwork that we lay for the next life. And so if the idea is that you are judged by your deeds, all of them, right? That you are supposed to set the best intentions in the work you do, right? We start off everything like Bismillah, you start off with good intentions, and then you are judged by your deeds. And so if you believe that you are constantly stacking up these deeds, I would like for mine to be mostly good, right? Like when I am before my Lord answering for what I've done in this world, I would like the scale to be tipped towards good, right? I would like to spend my time doing things that will be good for my mama, for my nieces and nephew, right? For the people that I care about. And the way that I do that is making sure that everybody is okay, right? Because I can't be good and healthy and whole if people around me aren't, right? You can't, there's no way that you can stand before your Lord and say, you know, I did all these wonderful things, but the people to the left and right of me were just struggling hard, right? And I never turned either way to check on them. And so that's how I approach every space I'm in, right? With that knowledge that that's how, that I got to answer for that. And so that's how I have conversations with other Muslims about this. So the community that I grew up in, I wouldn't say that they call themselves abolitionists, but they were absolutely doing abolition work, right? What is abolition work? What is mutual aid other than abolition work, right? Everything that Zainab was talking about, right? Like if communities don't have, they figure out a way, right? To get things that they need and to be as healthy as they can be. And that includes access to healthcare. That includes, transportation, food, shelter, the very basic things. And so I saw that growing up. And so when people say, oh, I don't know, abolitionist sounds like this like fancy kind of liberal thing that is not really practical for my daily life, then I have to ask them, okay, so what kind of community would you like to live in? And when they start saying stuff, I was like, okay, well, you don't know it, but you're an abolitionist, right? So don't get caught up on the academic side of the term. Think about how you want to live, what type of communities you want to have, and what you are willing to answer for when you stand before your Lord. And so I got to be on the side of the folks that are trying to get free. I don't ever want to align myself with people who are oppressors, right? And that is not a difficult line to see, right? Oppressors and those being oppressed is not like a thin line, it's a gulf. And you just got to choose what side you want to be on, right? It's as simple as that. It's not really that complicated. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so true. It really is as simple as that. This world doesn't make it more clear for us which side we should be on, right? And I really appreciate you, Sister Camila, for pointing out the fact that, especially as Muslims, our paying of zakat, all of the tenets of our faith of how we are supposed to interact with one another. Somebody mentioned cultivating interdependence. All of that is about creating a world that would be an abolitionist world. The fact that we even have to say abolitionist world is because we have existed in a society for so long that's been rooted in punishment and incarceration. Brother Jose, I would like you to take a shot at this question. And I do think that we should have all of our panelists weigh in on this idea of how Islam, how spirituality informs their work and work towards abolition.
Yes, there's a tradition that I take to heart. Whosoever of you sees an evil action, let him change it with his hand. If he is unable to do so, then change it with his tongue. And if he is unable to do so, then in his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. We are not powerless. We can change this evil. We can change this injustice. And another, what I find so refreshing about Islam is that justice is defined a lot different than justice according to this criminal legal system. Because this criminal legal system defines justice as perpetual punishment and vengeance. In Islam, justice has more components: mercy and forgiveness. And if we follow that, if we just embrace that concept of justice, our relationships with each other will be more healing, and it'll be a lot less about harm. And that is the problem that I have with this system, that it has no mercy and no forgiveness for us. They forgive each other, but they don't have no mercy whatsoever for us, knowing that they created these conditions, and still no mercy and no forgiveness. And I want to uplift a brother of mine who recently passed away, Salih Ali Abdullah, served 49 years in prison, went to his 14th parole board. And during his parole board, he asked to be excused to go to the bathroom and never returned. He had a massive stroke while he was in the bathroom. They tortured this brother and murdered him. And then the president of the Police Benevolent Association announces on the radio that Salih Abdullah got justice. This is why. This is just one case. But this is why we have to get away from punishment. We have to get away from that very concept that there has to be incarceration. If incarceration was the solution to public safety, we'd be the safest society in the world, because we incarcerate more people. You know, a story that I heard when I was in prison, I was watching the TV, an Arab store owner. There was a couple of kids out there, you know, they was, I guess, making a little bit too much noise for him. I guess they preventing customers from coming into his store. So he called the cops. And when the cops came, they wound up killing one of them young kids. And then he tells the reporter that had he known that by calling the police, someone was going to lose their life, he would just went out and talked to the kids. And that's what we're talking about, because this is where abolition starts, building relationships. You know, we do this all the time. We do this with our kids. We do this with our neighbors' kids. We do that with each other whenever there's a confrontation, no matter how heated it may be. We don't seek the ultra solution. We don't go to the worst solution. We go step by step. Let's talk about this. Yeah? Well, when we talk about it tomorrow, we're both a little less heated. You know, and this is how this is the very basics of an abolitionist approach. Always look for an approach that heals rather than create harm. I don't know if that answered the question.
Beyond. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Brother Jose. Inna Allahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. May God, from God we come and to God we return. All of our prayers and duas for Brother Saleh, who has passed, a martyr. Same question for Key and Zainab. Let's go to Key first. How does Islam, how does spirituality inform your work and your perspectives on abolition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, my faith is a good basis of where I try to lead my life from. Today, I played a lot of gospel in my house, and one of the songs I constantly played was, "Let the work that I do speak for me. Let the work that I do speak for me." And that is how I choose to live my life. I want people to know, when you judge me or you look at, just let the work that I do speak for me. And so it's so interesting because I pulled out my favorite scripture from the Quran, which talks very much about what we've all been hinting at. And so, I mean, I think the most important part is that the record of their deeds will be laid open, and you will see the guilty dismayed at what they contain, saying, woe to us, what a record this is. It does not leave any deed, small or large, unaccounted for, and they will find everything they ever did laid in front of them. Your Lord will not be unjust to anyone. Your Lord will not be unjust to anyone. And I think for me, that is a grounding way to look at this, to look at the world and look at how we hold each other and how we build relationships together and how we must take care of one another and keep ourselves safe. We keep us safe, right? That's the movement chant. Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. And when you do envision a world of safety and when you ask folks, what does safety look like? 99.9% of them will say and envision a world, they'll never mention police officers. They'll never say, when I'm sitting in my house, I'm not sitting in my house 24/7, like, wow, I really wish I had a police officer here to keep me safe all day. Wow, I'm taking my dog for a walk. I really would just love for a police officer to be at the corner to make sure that we cross the street perfectly fine. Majority of the people do their very best to actually avoid the police. When you're driving in a car, you're like, let me not get in a car accident because the last thing I need. So every day people do things to try their best to not have any, I think, interaction with the police officers, rich, poor, etc. That is the reality of what we aim for, I think, a more safe world. And part of that means removing the police, removing criminalization, removing punishment from our systems to have a more humane, a more just world, collectively for everybody. And that is what, for me, leading with my faith and standing in my faith and trusting in my faith tells me I should be doing. And so when my deeds are laid out, small or large, I hope that I'm not standing there surprised.
I don't think there'll be any surprises with you, Key. Zainab Sahar, how about you?
Oh boy. I love how everybody talked about deeds because I feel like that's the last thing I ever think about in life. So it is a great reminder. So one of the things I think about is I think about the Quran as a source of revelation and what it means for a message to be revealed. I started thinking about this within the context of affect theory a couple of years ago. And I've slowly been developing it while trying to facilitate Masjid Al Rabia's Quran study on top of teaching, right? And one of the things that I've become fond of saying is that revelations have their own grammars of possibility, meaning that they have an idea about the current state of the world when it is revealed, and they contain the possibility of what the world could be. And to that end, it changes the nature of what it means to be a believer. So to be a Muslim, in many respects, in my mind, is to actively believe in the literal changing of the world. Like if you read passages as where the earth is literally being changed, the world is not the same as it was before, within the context of particular revelations, that has a kind of power to it in and of itself. And when you think about that within the context of interpersonal interactions, I think about the fact that you can do someone wrong and you are not marked by that for the rest of your life. You can think about repentance as this thing of oh, I have to repent so that I don't go to hell. And I'm like, that's a choice. But you can also think about it within the context of your religion provides you an opportunity to not only make amends for doing something wrong, but that you are not marked forever by the terrible or harmful things that you do. And that's particularly unique in my mind, that we believe in a religion that literally says that every day you have a new opportunity to do something different, to believe differently, and to enact that out in the world. And so for me, so then I want to connect that to fiqh because I'm really not a Quranist by any stretch of the imagination, right? But then when I think about fiqh, I think about the fact that like legal change, whatever that means, is possible. And that's hard, I think, for people to imagine in our society because we have such a really terrible relationship with what it means for law and legality to change. But in our tradition, there are avenues of legal change. Jurists change their minds one way or another all the time. And sometimes it's because, hey, I just don't have the sauce to support my previous like views. And I have to recognize that, own that, and go from there. As much as fiqh has a lot of problems, I think it's also powerful for thinking about that there are real avenues of change that can occur in terms of how we think about the world and how we want the world to be structured. But within our tradition, I just feel like we have so many tools and opportunities that really force us to think about, well, if I'm a Muslim, then what is the nature of my belief? What does it mean that I accept this revealed text as this revelation as something that is significant to me? And for us, belief is not passive by any stretch of the imagination. It is something that has to be acted out on a daily basis. And I think for people who are like, how do I have this conversation about abolition in Muslim communities? One way that I've gotten people who were not on the plane of abolition whatsoever to think about it is to think about, well, what does it mean? What is the nature of belief for you? Not in that like highfalutin kind of way, but like, what does it mean to believe in this for you? Because a lot of people say like mercy, forgiveness. They list the attributes of God that allow them to feel comfort in the fact that like, we don't believe in a God that's like gonna automatically send you to hell for stealing someone's stapler, you know? And it's like, those divine attributes are not just God's alone. Those are things that we can embody as well. And when people start to think of it on that level, they're just like, oh, I can be merciful towards like other people, right? I'm just like, yeah, that wasn't ever foreclosed to you, but I'm glad you realize that now. So yeah, that's what I think about in terms of the relationship between belief and abolition.
Thank you. I love that. That's so powerful. What you said in the beginning of your comments around Islam being a revelation, right? Quran being a revelation is just so deep. This idea that every day is a revelation to us. And so every day you have the opportunity to re-examine, to reanalyze how you approach the world. This is fantastic. I want to thank all of you. I want each of you to take a minute to give closing thoughts and closing remarks to our audience that's filled with students of the law, students of policy, students of health, students of the world. It sounds like everyone here is really grappling with how to make the world a better place, how to employ the tools that they have, how to employ their beliefs, their communities. And the four of you are such examples of leadership. Like we couldn't have, Zainab K, you couldn't have picked 4 better examples of leadership in this space. Like you really couldn't have. So thank you to you all for coming. And I would just appreciate if you would leave our folks with some closing thoughts, and we'll go to Brother Jose first.
I want to thank everyone that came here, and I want to also invite them to join RAP in this campaign that is designed to ultimately dismantle this legal criminal system that is dominated by the legacy of racism. We meet or we have virtual meetings every first Wednesday of the month. That's going to be on the 4th of November. Visit our website, rapcampaign.com, and get more insight into what we're doing and all the events coming up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Key.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody, especially this panel and Z for getting us all here and staying on top of us to make sure that we got here. And for Rap, for, as you shared earlier, shifting your meeting. It's always powerful to be with you, Brother Jose. And I always feel blessed to be in your presence and under your mentorship in so many different ways. Yeah, I'm just grateful for everybody that came tonight and continue to support the abolitionist work. I think if you're here, then you're asking the right questions. If you're here, then you're in the right place. And just remember that everybody has a role in this movement. Every single person has a role in this movement. If you don't have a role, then you're not in the movement. And that's really hard for folks to hear, but if you don't have a role, you're not in this movement. So find your role, find your lane, and do your work. Do the work.
Thank you. Zainab.
So I want to again thank everyone for being here. And one thing that I will leave you with is one of the things I often think about is how our prophet often had doubts about whether another revelation was possible and another world was possible. And so in those moments of doubt, when you are wondering if this is ever going to come into fruition in your lifetime, remember that the earth trembled, and through those liminal moments and of uncertainty, you came to know your Lord. You came to know your faith. And as you continue, you will continue to know the people who you will build a better world with.
Thank you. And Sister Camilla.
I don't know how to top like 3 mic drops in a row. So I am grateful for being part of this conversation. And I will say this. Being a student is an active thing, right? Like you are not just there to take in and absorb things that your professors give you. You are there to analyze it. You are there to interrogate it. You are there to challenge it, right? And you are doing it not just as an academic exercise. You are doing it so that you can continue to do that, right? So that you are continuing to challenge things the way they are. So that when you leave school and you start your professional careers, that you bring that lens to whatever work you do. And that you find your space to do that. You know, we need dreamers. So dream, right? Really think about how things can be different. And don't worry about if you'll ever be able to get it all done. Do it. It's worth doing it, right? Even if you don't think like that you're gonna see this change, it's worth doing. It's worth doing, it's worth being a part of. And I hope to be in community with folks who feel the same way.
Thank you so much. Once again, I'm so honored. Thank you, Zainab K, for asking me to sit alongside our freedom fighters. I appreciate each of you and everything that you're doing for this entire planet and for humanity. Before you all sign off, I'm going to kick it back to Zainab Khalil to close it out and to give us some technical notes about follow-up and what will be available after tonight.
Thank you, Fatima, and wow, to our panel. Ameen, ameen, ameen to your du'as and revelations. Really, it feels like we're just on the receiving end of so much wisdom and depth, and it's really a privilege and gift to be around you. So thank you for sharing and for teaching us tonight. And we hope to continue this conversation with you and with others in the home, on the streets, in the masjid, in the classroom, wherever it is. So just a few things. You will be receiving an email tomorrow that will give you some links if you want to stay updated or connected to some of the work that the panelists are doing, including the event that I mentioned that RAP is hosting next week with Brother Jose and other speakers. And we'll also send out the link of the video of this recording, as well as the chat maybe. I think some people threw some really good resources in there, so we'll share that as well. But other than that, yes, thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Fatima, for being an excellent talk show host. And thank you to the live captioners as well. Until next time, inshallah, take care.